Alright guys, we're talking about football news, and today it's a big story in the Premier League regarding Eddie Howe and Newcastle and how much of a problematic situation is for Howe at the moment at Newcastle, and we're going to get into it right now. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment below if you want to talk about Newcastle United or any other team in the league, and let's get straight to it. Howe's biggest Newcastle challenge yet as questions grow on his future, and they continue to grow day by day, week by week, as Newcastle's form is in the pit at the moment. It's been an awful season for Newcastle in every regard. They did make some progress in cup competitions, but in both circumstances, once they hit that kind of threshold where their limit is, they just got absolutely obliterated. Lost to Manchester City in the cup. I think they lost to Manchester City in both cup competitions domestically this year, and also they went out of the Champions League with a whimper after a pretty good performance in the league stage of the competition. But where they are now in the Premier League is a big problem, and it's not just their position in the league, it's their ongoing form week to week, which is looking pretty bad, and it's looking like it's gone a bit stale for the players at Newcastle United with Howe at the moment. And the Bournemouth performance yesterday kind of sum things up really, and Kieran Trippier, who came off the bench at half time to replace Lewis Hall, kind of sums it up really. The fact that they were making substitutes at half time, the players were just not performing, and that's talking about Lewis Hall, who's been one of their best performers all season long, but his form has dipped away as well, and it's just not looking good. They did not look like they were going to get the goals needed today to get the win over Bournemouth, and Bournemouth continue to show how much of a good team they are under Iraola. Despite the fact that Iraola is leaving at the end of the season, their team are still playing for him, and they put in another performance. But at Newcastle, the others cannot be said. They have been performing very badly. No other side has conceded more late goals than Newcastle. 19 in the Premier League this season. They're languishing in 14th place, and that's their 8th defeat in 11 fixtures. And the fans are starting to turn on Howe. We're hearing boos around the ground. And will Howe be the next Newcastle boss next season? What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. I'm not sure. Is it too close to call? I'm feeling it's leaning slightly towards yes or no. Who knows? Will Howe be the boss next season? Let's say no. What are the people saying? 57% are saying no. Howe is not going to be Newcastle manager next season. 30% say yes. 12% too close to call. It is up in the air at the moment, but I'm leaning towards no at the moment. We'll have to wait and see how things go there. Howe's biggest challenge here is getting the players to play for him at the moment. It just doesn't seem like they're actually doing that. If you look at the body of work that he's had at Newcastle, the players always played for him, and that was the final of the League Cup last year. Epitomised that perfectly against a really good Manchester City team. The players just came absolutely out firing and looked amazing, and they got the job done. They won the trophy they needed to win after such a long time without any trophy in Newcastle. They did the business, but where things are now, it's just dropped off a cliff to where they were last year. And you know, they've had time over the international break. There was 3 weeks there, I think, in the end, where there were no league games, and they came out with a whimper last time out. They didn't perform. And if you look at their last 10 Premier League games, it's just absolutely dire. Absolutely dire. Goals conceded 20. That's 18th in the league. This is relegation form they're facing at the moment. 144 shots faced, 15th in the league. Save percentage. The goalkeepers have been bad all season. Pope had his moments where he was performing well, but then he just dropped away. Brought in Ramsdale. Doesn't look like he could save anything. The ball just goes straight through him, and that can be seen in the save percentage. 59.2%. That's 19th in the league. Expected goals against 20.3. 19th in the league. Quality of shots faced 20th, 0.14. They're the worst in the league in that metric. It's just not a good situation defensively, and they are leaky at the back, and they are blunt in the final third. It is not a good situation in Newcastle at the moment. But the question is, why is that happening? Why is that happening? £124 million worth of forwards on the bench in Voltemada and Visser, playing William Missoula, who scored a goal, but what else did he do? Not much. But defensively is where the big drop-off is for Newcastle, it seems, compared to previous seasons where they have normally had one of the best defences in the league over the last few years under Eddie Howe. But I think we have to look at what does this come down to? Why are we in this situation where Newcastle are just not performing at any sort of level. The players are not turning out. And one of the biggest issues they had was the depth of their squad. It was still kind of a lot of players carried over from their days in the Championship, like very fringe players at the club who were still kind of hanging around. The quality and the strength and depth just wasn't there. They had a very limited number of players that they worked with last year, which got them into the Champions League and won the League Cup. Maybe like 14 players, maybe 15 players. Not enough players to sustain over multiple competitions over multiple years. And they went multiple transfer windows with not signing any players. That's one issue. But then it came to the financial fair play side of things. They had to sell Elliot Anderson, who's turned out to be one of the best centre midfielders in Europe. They've also had to see Yankuba Minter go, a right-wing talent that they picked up really cheap, that they then sold on for a very low amount. They then paid double the amount for a right-winger who probably isn't as good as Minter in Anthony Elanga. And that brings us around to the transfers. The transfers in general have been really poor. They've really bad deal with Nottingham Forest where they had to buy Nottingham Forest's backup goalkeeper for a ridiculous amount of money, who's not even played one game for Newcastle, who's out on loan somewhere. And then in the make weight for Elliot Anderson going to Nottingham Forest, it was just probably one of the worst transfers in the history of mankind. But if we take a look at the transfer situation at Newcastle from this past summer, and you look at the top few transfers that they've made: Voltemada, Elanga, Visser, Jacob Ramsey, Malik Chow. Of those, only Malik Chow has been a resounding success. Malik Chow has been very, very good this year in a very poor team. So that transfer has been a success on multiple fronts. Not only is the talent there and the play there, but the transfer value was very, very good. Then you look at the four signings above that, and none of them get in the first 11 as things stand. And I'll start with Voltemada because I think he's a really good player. And I think when he's played for Newcastle, he's done well. And he had a really good start to the season with scoring goals on a regular basis. But then things just dropped off a cliff. And that's mainly down to the fact that the system that Howe wants to play, he's just very rigid to. 4-3-3. Very pacey, very pressing in the front three. Voltemada just isn't that sort of player. And it begs the question, why on earth did they sign him? And it's very much a case of panic button being hit when Isak was dragging things out and not leaving. And I think, as most people remember thinking back, there was that long period where Newcastle were linked with absolutely every player under the sun. Hugo Ekitike was one that comes to mind, but multiple striker after multiple striker Newcastle were linked with, and then they went elsewhere. I think there were rumours about Mateus Cunha, Brian Mbeumo, both ended up going to Manchester United. How too much of these rumours were, who knows? But I think the fact of the matter is that there was this long period of sustained failure in terms of bringing in someone new in the door, because what you want to do, get your signings done, then you sell on the players you don't want or are not going to be there anymore. Isak, it became clear he was never going to be there, so Newcastle's hands were tied. They were in a panic buy situation and they made some awful decisions last summer. On Voltemada, not on the quality of the player, I think that's there, but if your system is so rigid and you're not going to adapt it to fit his style of play and change things up for him, why are you signing him? It was an absolute fortune they spent on him. I think he's a brilliant player. He just doesn't seem to fit Eddie Howe's style and how he wants to play. Anthony Elanga, absolute disaster of a signing for me. He had one period of a bit of a run of good form with Forest, but nothing sustained over a period of time to warrant that outlay on that player who appears to have no final third product. His decision-making in the final third is really poor in general. Passing, shooting, lack of both of those, it's just been really, really bad. But the outlay on a player, and you compare that to Jacob Murphy last year, who's been a pretty solid performer for Newcastle. He really stepped up last year, and then he didn't get a chance. And then they've also been rotating Harry Barnes and Anthony Gordon in and around that position too. So it begs the question, why did you sign Anthony Elanga? He's barely played. And if he has got something there to show us, he's not getting a consistent run of form to show us that either. So, but from what we've seen, the quality just isn't there for the outlay that Newcastle gave Nottingham Forest. It just seems an absolutely disastrous signing. Johan Visser had a really good season previous year with Brentford, but again, the amount of money for his age profile, absolutely a crazy decision. He's not worth the money they gave him. Obviously, Brentford just said, this is how much we're going to take. If you want to buy him, pay us or don't. And Newcastle fell into that trap and bought him. And you look at Brentford, they've gone from strength to strength this year. They've not missed Visser whatsoever. And Newcastle have barely seen him on the pitch. Unfortunate situation with injuries, but even if he was there, I don't think it would have made much difference because he's not the first choice, and he wouldn't have been the first choice anyway. And then Jacob Ramsey, really solid player, but A, not worth the value that Newcastle paid for him. B, doesn't upgrade the first 11. He's not going to get in ahead of Tonali, Guimaraes and Joe Linton. He just isn't. So it's just a blocker for Lewis Miley, for example. So again, it makes no sense. And Malik Chow, as I said, the only one that's been a real success. Newcastle brought in Aaron Ramsdale on loan. They needed a goalkeeper backup. They were going off to James Trafford for a while. He ended up going back to Manchester City. But again, Ramsdale, not an upgrade on Pope. Why did they sign him? They wanted a backup, I guess. It just didn't work out. And that's it. And then you compare that to previous years. They just made no signings whatsoever. It's a real disastrous situation. The whole transfer situation is really, really poor. This will set Newcastle back for multiple windows. Whereas they were talking about progressing, evolving, continuing to move things forward. Those signings have been an absolute disaster for multiple reasons, on the pitch and off the pitch. They're already flirting with the thresholds of the previous financial fair play and the new system that's in place now. They're right on the edge and always on the edge. Why? Because the revenues are just not there to sustain the caliber of player they need to bring in to evolve the squad. And now the big problem Eddie Howe's got is that the players have just gone stale to his ways of working, and the performances are no longer there. They're in a really, really bad situation, and they're going to have to sell again this summer now, and they're going to have to try and evolve the squad again. But are they going to be able to do that? It's a really, really, really bad situation for Eddie Howe now. The team is just not performing, and they need to evolve the squad again. Is he the man to do it? Who knows? It's a really tricky situation. I'm not convinced he's the man to take them forward. It feels like the players are no longer listening to his ideas. And you compare this to when he originally left Bournemouth. That all petered out and went stale, and things just stopped working. And with the inability to take the time to reflect, evolve and learn from what's not working, because it's so relentless, and particularly when you're playing the amount of games Newcastle played this year, which is all going pretty far in cup competitions alongside the league play, is just not enough time for Howe to actually stand still, take a step back, look at what he's doing and evolve the team, whether in formation, tactics or player personnel. Is just not there. And I think another big problem is the recruitment side of the club. That has been an ongoing problem for a number of seasons now, where whoever is in charge is not in charge, is in conflict with Howe, is been a revolving door of people in that position. And they've got to where they are now. They brought in a new guy, and it remains to be seen. I guess the upcoming transfer window will be the most telling one, but they don't appear to have much flexibility in the market to go out and get the players they need. It feels like they spent a ton of money and got absolutely nothing back for it. The caliber of player they brought in, the amount of money they spent, it just wasn't there. I feel like they would have been much better getting a sort of similar player profile to Malik Chow. He only cost about 20-25 million pounds, and he's just proved to kind of take that next step up and go to that next level. They needed 3 or 4 more signings like that, I think. Keep some money in the bank as well, and then actually get some good talent in this summer, perhaps. Instead, they wasted money on Visser. They've wasted money on Voltemada in the sense that Voltemada doesn't fit into the team. And then Alanga, the amount of money they spent on him to get no end product from him, it's just an absolute disastrous situation. And they're in a situation now where all their top players are being linked away again. Tonali, Hall, Livramento, Anthony Gordon looks like he might be on the way out as well. Unless they can get top income from those players. And even if they do, I wouldn't have any confidence they'd spend it well enough to replace those players. We'll have to wait and see. But as things stand, it looks like a perilous situation for Howe. Let me know in the comments, what do you think? I think Howe is on the precipice of going and leaving the club. I don't think they're going to respond to him anymore. I think he's gone. But I'm interested to know what you think. Thanks for watching. Speak to you again next time.